Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. It's your host, Chele, and today we have UltrAspire Athlete Manager Ricky Urias. And he may not be a professional athlete, but he's proven to be a force to be reckoned with out on the trails. He's been trail running for only 3 years for the joy and feeling of freedom it gives him, but that joy also landed him the most recently in the 9th at challenging and competitive Zion 100 miler. He considers himself just an average guy trying to live life above average, considering the things he's done and what he has yet to accomplish. He's been married for 21 years to his wife, Chele, and has 3 kids with 1 grandson. After spending most of his life doing blue-collar jobs in 2024, he decided he wanted to take a new path and was hired on by UltrAspire part-time before becoming the company's athlete manager. Looking forward to chatting to a so-called ordinary runner who has accomplished extraordinary things. Enjoy the listen. Hello, everybody. We are back with Ricky Urias. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, he's at the. Are you done with your workday, or you have more work to do after
Done
this?
with my workday. I snuck out a little bit early to do this, but it all lines up with similar work stuff either way, and then I can always work
Yeah,
from home a little bit if I need to later on. And
awesome. Well, appreciate you joining us today. We are very excited to learn all about your so much stuff, but we're excited to learn from you. So our listeners know how we operate. We dive straight into our two truths and a lie. So I'm going to let you break those down for me.
all right, I guess my first one would be is I grew up in a small farming community, and then participated in like a 4-H and
Mm-hmm.
Western showmanship thing.
Okay.
And then I guess my next one was I played semi-pro football for about four years.
Okay.
And my last one is I was a walk-on scholarship recipient for the University of Utah for football.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
It's my
These are
three.
all tricky ones, but I do feel like in my research, I feel like you definitely played semi-pro football. I feel like you for sure did that, but I don't know if it was for 4 years. It could be a plot twist in there. Um, Walk-on scholarship. That's pretty rad. I think you did grow up in a small farming community. Hmm. I feel like there's a year thing going on with the semi-pro football. So I'm going to say that's a lie, but don't tell me the answer. We'll wait and reveal and see what fun stories come from the rest of the ones that are truths. Um, okay, well, I definitely want to dive into your recent Zion 100 placement. But before we dive down that rabbit hole, what got you excited and interested into running, but running very long distances?
Um, I don't know exactly what clicked in my brain to want to do the long distance stuff. I started off I come from a fighting background, and so
Mm,
I've been competitive a lot in my life, and then just sports from the time I was young. And during the time I was fighting, I had told myself never don't let your body get back as far out of shape as I was once at one point in my life, extremely
mhm,
unhealthy. And so I kind of just started getting back to the point where I noticed I was starting to put on a lot more weight. My
mm,
body was starting to hurt, and I'm like, well, I've got to do something to get back active instead of just going out hiking in the mountains and doing it. It just wasn't enough. And at that time, I think that's like 2019 or 2020. And I had kind of discovered the Spartan racing and obstacle course stuff. And then realized there was one about 45 minutes from my house, and it was like 4 or 6 months away. And I just figured, I can train and see how I do during this.
mhm.
And then right after, so leading up to that, it ended up being COVID happened, and then they
Oh,
canceled all the races for that year. And
shoot.
so I just kind of kept training throughout that year. And it was kind of disappointing because I ended up deciding to do 2 that year. First one got canceled, and then I had already pre-booked out like a trip to go
Oh no.
to another one later on that was supposed to be the longer half marathon distance of it. And
Mm,
so ended up kind of going through that entire year. I just kept training and had no idea what I was doing really
mhm,
strength conditioning wise, or I was just going out running to thinking I was kind of trimming the weight down, which I ended up doing. I
mhm.
ended up competing or completing all three of the Spartan distances, and they call it, so it's a 5K to a half marathon,
Wow.
a trifecta. All your medals match up. And during that time, I wanted to run another half marathon, a trail half marathon, to see if I could actually, for one, complete a half marathon, and then not without the obstacles, of course. And then
Yeah.
went to a small race in a small town here, and it was the first year of the race, and there was about 100 people, and ended up just being a totally different experience of
Mm.
realizing the trail world is way more of the type of person I want to be around instead of the Spartan people.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, it was, I was trying to get away from kind of that high testosterone crowd after getting away from fighting.
Yeah.
It was putting me back into it, and I really wasn't crazy about it. And they
Hmm.
have a special community also, and it's people that are outside, kind of they're mid to back of the packers. They're all there helping each other, and
Yeah.
it is similar to actual trail running also, but just it was still different than I was wanting to do. And
Yeah.
I kind of learned over that time it was far funner just going and disappearing in the mountains for a couple hours than it was having to run and then still try to do the weightlifting or physical carries and things like that
Yeah.
also. And so shortly after that, I ended up, that would have been July, and so I ended up signing up for a half marathon, another mountain half marathon. That would have been that August, I think. I may
Wow.
have my years back. It might have been the year after. Um, yeah, it would have been the year after, because I was supposed to do my first 55K that December after doing those Spartan races, and ended up
Mm.
getting COVID and getting extremely
Shoot.
sick like 3 days before the race.
Oh
And
gosh.
it was kind of crushing at that point, and then ended up, the next best option after dealing with that heartbreak was signing up for the Javelina 100 like 3 weeks after, when it opened for the next year.
Oh wow. Yeah.
It went from never running more than a marathon distance on a road in like 12 or 13 years prior, to only running a couple half marathons, and signing up for a 100-mile race even before I had completed a 55K. So it was a little bit wild of an experience to try to get into
Yeah.
and learn pretty quick, pretty fast of what I wanted
Yeah.
to do.
That's impressive. Were you like self-trained or were you working with a coach or?
I had self-trained through all the Spartan stuff, and then
Hmm.
once I got to the point of making that commitment to sign up for the 100-miler, I
Mm.
realized I needed somebody to help kind of direct me in the right path.
Yeah.
And so I worked with my first coach for probably about a year, a little over a
Hmm.
year, and then ended up just kind of suffering some burnout, and
Hmm.
it started becoming not fun.
Mm.
And so it was a mental thing, and I had some success. I had won some hard half marathons. There's a local one, and it's on up at one of our, just outside of one of our little parks we have here called Cedar Breaks. And the whole race is like 9,000 to 12,000 feet, and
Wow.
the half marathon, a couple thousand feet of climbing during the race.
Hmm.
And so I had those kind of successes, and then, but it just got back to the point where I was putting way too much pressure on myself.
Hmm.
It wasn't fun. And that's kind of when I got out of fighting also. It's when it wasn't fun anymore, it was like, why am I
Yeah.
doing this, and what's the point?
Yeah.
And then I ended up running Zion 50K
Mm.
that following year. I ended up having I was struggling mentally pretty hard at that time for motivation. I had been sick the month before. I went out and ran a 30K and did way better than I thought I was going to, but wasn't mentally there, wasn't really wanting to be at the race at that time. Um, had an awesome plan. I felt like my conditioning, everything was all where it
Mm.
needed to be, even with the way I was mentally. And I went out and started. I had until about 14, 15 miles, I was having a really good day. I was ahead of what I was thinking.
Mm.
Probably would have been about a 4:30 to 4:40 finish if I would have
Wow.
been able to do it. And I ended up having problems. I fell down. I made a dumb mistake and tried to fill
Oh.
a water bottle with my electrolyte powder. I had kicked a cactus
Oh.
maybe a mile before that, and then after I took my fall, it was just the wheels kind of fell off, and
Yeah.
I kind of recouped, and I still finished. I think I was 14th overall and like 10th male, so it was a top 10 at a
Wow.
decently hard trail race, but it was like I crossed the finish line, and I was more upset that I
Mm.
hit my goal
Hmm.
um, than my actual accomplishment. And so for me, it was kind of that bittersweet moment, and it was shortly after that I had to make kind of that hard decision to move on from the coach I had been working with, even though
Mm.
I mean, she had taught me a bunch,
Hmm.
and we're still friends, but it was just we were so much alike of kind of that headstrong thinking I needed to always push. And
Yeah.
I think the pushing was too much. And at the end of the day, just became unhealthy for what I was
Yeah.
trying to do. So
Yeah. How did your body handle that training volume? Just in general, like all the way getting up to 100.
I was out. That's when I met with her that January. I had actually ran a, a local half marathon. It was a road only. I ran two half road halves in my life, and they both been 5 minutes from my house. And
Mm.
so she had asked kind of what my training was going up into that half marathon, not knowing what I was doing. And in my mind, it was the preparation for the 50K I was going to do. But I had ran like from Monday through Thursday afternoon, I had ran like 60 miles in those 4 days. And
Wow.
then what my plan wasn't, or I didn't run Friday, is I'm just take the day off. And then I went and ran like a 132 half marathon. So I ended up doing like 73 miles. So I was way over training at that time anyways.
Yeah.
But I also spent a lot of time on my feet from the job I was doing.
Hmm.
I worked in food delivery.
Hmm.
Um, so I basically drove a truck, semi truck,
Hmm.
and had to hand deliver all the food and
Hmm.
to different restaurants. So I think that played into a factor. But I'm betting if that I didn't have that as a job, it probably would have torn my body up, and I would have been suffered probably some pretty big injuries. And
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
when then
It,
training into javelina, I had some issues, and I don't know if it was overtraining wise. I had probably 5 to 6 weeks of close to 100 miles.
wow.
And one of those weeks I had to make an emergency trip to Colorado, and I ended up running like 40-ish miles all on a concrete path it's next to a river, and not knowing how my shin was already having some issues, and I think that just compounded it of
Yeah.
tear on concrete instead of running on dirt. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. It is a different ball game for the joints and the shins when you are on the hard packs. Well, yeah, pavement. So with kind of leading up with that and through that process too, what was your nutrition like fueling plan like talking back to the Spartan situation now going like 50Ks and or half marathon to 50Ks and then onward, how has that evolved?
so from all the way, sadly, it's evolved a little bit, but hasn't really changed much at the same time. I had no plan when I first started running. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just buying
Yeah.
kind of random goo gels or whatever I thought. And
Hmm.
I didn't really ever fuel for anything unless it was over. If I was going to go do like an 18 or a 20-mile run, I would take some snacks and water with me. I didn't really know about the electrolyte drinks, things like that.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I had gotten my coach, I kind of started looking at different things and testing different things out. Um, and I've just kind of always used Tailwind as
Hmm.
electrolyte mix, but I don't really through that whole year, I never really put like a plan together of how much I should be drinking an hour, how many calories. I've just kind of winged it with, okay, if I'm getting close to 200 calories an hour, whether it be liquid or something solid, I'm just getting enough. And it's just kind of always been that way. And then
Um,
it's seemed to work out fairly well. So,
yeah. Yeah. And so you do still doing 200 calories an hour now?
um, yes and no. that hurt this year. I don't know how many calories I was taking in. I don't
Mm,
know how much sodium I was taking in. I had an awesome plan of all my bags laid out of what I was going to grab at an aid station for 5 to 6 hours, knowing just enough to get me between aid stations. And then if I was going to eat something at an aid station, that plan pretty much went out the window 2 or 3 hours in, probably as soon as I hit the second aid station. It's because it's a looped course,
mm,
and I just wasn't feeling the gels I had taken, even the blocks or the chews, whatever it was. It was just like I just didn't want it. So I ended up primarily eating like fruit cups, and then
mm,
I ate a lot of musubi there, which is just rice. And
mm-hmm,
um, there was one that was like a salted plum. I ate a bunch of those,
mm,
and then, but that was pretty much what I ate most of the day. Was just rice balls,
yeah.
and then I shockingly, I never really cramped on that one. I didn't drink a bunch of the electrolytes I took. I was kind of mixing in like the goo Roctane
Mm-hmm,
pills or whatever, the salt pills, whatever they
yeah.
are. And
Mm-hmm,
that seemed to work out I would take a couple every other hour, and
yeah.
just mixed a bunch of water with it. And it seemed to be fine, even in the conditions.
Wow. Wow. So now kind of like jumping to Zion, which was last month now, right? Zion 100,
Yeah.
um, placed ninth overall, correct?
Yes. Ninth overall.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. It's
So it,
incredible. Tell myself and our listeners, like, what were the conditions like that day?
um, people are going to think it's weird because I'm going to say it wasn't very hot, but it was low 80s. It was cloudy all day.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the conditions were about perfect. It's the morning started at about 45 to 48 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
By about 11:30, it started climbing, and then
Mm-hmm.
the cloud cover most of the day was pretty perfect. But there was a lot
Yeah.
of people who hadn't gotten enough heat training, and it was for somebody who doesn't train here and live in the elements, it was an
Mm-hmm.
extremely hard race with the conditions for them. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of people that were not prepared for the heat and
Yeah.
the desert air. So,
Yeah. So let's talk about heat training for a second. So what is your heat training protocol?
well, just living in southern Utah, so I
Yeah.
basically the course is maybe 1,000 feet higher than where I live,
Mm-hmm.
but I live basically 40. I think it takes me 45 minutes to get to the start line from my house.
Oh, nice.
So the trails I run on daily, I can be out of my front door into a dirt and with like 3 minutes.
Nice.
And so it makes it extremely easy. And then I have a state park that's like a mile and a half, 2 miles from my house that I run in the most. And then, but yeah, so that's primarily the heat training. This was the first time I actually went to a it's like a physical therapy office, but they have a cold plunge and a sauna
Oh,
there.
yeah.
There's a guy I coached helped me,
Mm-hmm.
paid for a couple months for me to go to the facilities and use it. And so
Nice.
it was nice. So I'd go sit in the sauna for like half hour, 45 minutes, but it was for me, even I think it was getting to like 170 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I'd sit in there for like a half hour and I would really not sweat.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and so I just being acclimated to the
Yeah.
area has been the biggest help. And
Mm-hmm.
through most of the spring, it was already up to 70 degrees, probably 6 weeks before the race.
Yeah.
So I
And
just
do you try and do your training runs like in the peak heat of the day?
yeah. So last year, even on a lot of my runs, if I can't run in the morning, well, that's the thing. Even when I get up in the morning, it's still 80 degrees in the dark, so it's hot. But a lot of my runs last year, going September or August, September, going into the Bear, I would go run in that state park, and it would be like 104, 105 degrees.
Wow.
But the sun would be far enough over the
Mm.
mountain to where it would at least be fully shaded.
Yeah.
And there's other days I'll just try to run 11, 12 o'clock. And then
Yeah.
there's a mountain that we go out to it's like 7 miles and about 4,000 feet of elevation. It's a 14-mile round trip with about a little over 4,000 feet that we'll go out to. And
Wow.
you, by 9, 10 o'clock, it's all exposed on the fire road you go up. And so I think that just
Yeah.
I guess the muscle memory of the sweat makes it.
Yeah. Definitely. The natural, I think I sometimes mix them up, but I think it's acclimatization where it's where you heat train in your natural environment. And yeah, I mean it's a real effective way to do it. 104 with the sun down sounds still very toasty, but it's really incredible. So I'd be so curious, have you done any sweat testing?
I did one at our local running store. I don't know how
Mhm.
accurate it really is. It's they throw an armband on you and then
Oh yeah.
at the same time I can't remember if it was that one or they were doing that and then pricking my finger at the same time, so I can't remember what
Mm,
testing I was doing, but I
maybe
was
lactate.
yeah, lactic threshold testing, but I was pretty low for what I think I should have been. I was like in the 600-ish, 5 to 650 or something in
Okay.
my sodium.
Yeah.
But as crunchy as my clothes get, and as much as I feel like I sweat once it's weird. I don't really sweat when I'm moving. It's not until I stop, and then it's
Hmm.
like I've just jumped out of a pool suddenly.
Yeah.
But the amount of buildup, I would think I would be losing way more than that an hour. But
Yeah. But you said the air's really dry too where you are?
yeah, the air's really dry. It gets
Yeah.
humid every once in a while, but for the most part, it's really, really dry air.
Yeah. I've noticed that with athletes where like the drier environment, you can see salt typically easier on the kits. And sometimes it throws people off because they think they're losing more salt when they go train in a drier environment or at altitude sometimes, and they're not necessarily losing more salt. Like if you went to a more humid environment, you might notice less salt because there's so much moisture already in the air that it's not pulling the water from your sweat off your skin as fast and leaving the salt crystals behind. Sometimes people notice that. But yeah, I'd be so fascinated if you did like to a sweat loss test of weighing yourself before in that environment. I feel like you've got to be losing like loads of fluid.
Yeah, I probably need to do that and then just kind of keep track of what I drink. But my biggest issue is I'll go out for a 12 to 20 mile run and really not take much with me. And so that's the my my fueling and hydration strategy is not very well received in the office I work in. And I have my coworker who just thinks my other coworker and myself are just wild men of going out and running for that many miles and not taking anything with us. So
Yeah. Well, it's like you're familiar with Elliot Kipchoge, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he trained to tolerate an insane amount of dehydration. He lost 10% of his body weight when he did the 2 hour marathon or sub 2 hour marathon. Like, so it sounds like that's what you're you've trained to tolerate potentially a pretty high amount of yeah, dehydration, and you're still functioning and operating well. So that's in your favor when it comes to these hot races, I would imagine. So when it does come to something like Zion last month, what do you recall what your nutrition or hydration strategy was during the race?
So I was fortunate enough to get some pre-release tailwind at that time.
Oh yeah.
So it's now the high carb and it was higher sodium, higher carb. I had a plan to drink one of those packs like every 2.5 hours because it was like
Mm-hmm.
300 and something calories.
Hmm.
And then I believe it was fairly high in sodium also. It might have been 600 milligrams of sodium. And my plan was
Hmm.
to kind of start and get ahead on the carbs and hydration a little bit early. And then that plan stuck for the first 18-ish miles.
Nice.
And after that, it just kind of, and then I had kind of some of my chews, and I've been using those. I think that the carb gels.
Oh yeah.
I like those. They sit, anything sits well. I can eat about anything. I've got an iron gut. But so my plan was eating one of those about every hour and then
Hmm.
kind of mixing in that
Hmm.
the drink also, and then kind of swapping between that and water throughout the day.
Nice.
And then, like I said, it was 3 hours in, it was already made it to 3 hours, grabbed my other food that I had. I had like I think it was a Bobo's
Hmm.
peanut butter and jelly, but I got the wrong one. So it was way thick and
Oh.
it was heavier. It was first so feeling strategy. Let's try something new on race day. So I bought it 2 days before and then didn't realize it was the wrong one. And it was just heavy and
Yeah.
it didn't sit well. It sat well, but it was just way thicker and
Mm.
wanted to eat at that point. And then I just kind of stuck to mostly just tailwind for the next few hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I drank a ton of pickle juice, which is kind of the norm,
Mm.
mixed in some of those goo pills. And then I was only eating, I can't remember what I ate. I didn't eat anything at the aid station before I dropped down into the Virgin Desert, which was the hottest part of the day.
Wow.
Um, they, luckily enough, at the time I went through, ran out of ice and water. So I ended up dropping down
Gosh.
to like an 8 or 9 mile section with just over a liter of water and no way to stay cool. And it's
Oh my gosh.
all all fully exposed, no trees, no nothing into that section. Luckily, I'm guessing my heat training and strategy that I've been using in life has paid off.
Sounds like it's working.
And then I don't remember, I ate some rice balls and a whole bunch of nerds clusters at that aid station,
Oh yeah.
a couple little pancakes that um, somebody had given me. And then at that point, it was just, I wasn't really feeling any of the
Mm.
electrolyte mix, any of the food really. So I think I survived the next 40 miles, 30 miles, all on nerd clusters and water
Wow.
and then had some watermelon at a couple of the aid stations. And that was about it. I had kind of sectioned out a bunch of little baggies of the nerd clusters of
Mm.
thinking I would have enough to where it would be like 2 servings, and I would just kind of graze on those throughout
Hmm.
and think, okay, I've got another hour till I get to the aid station. I've ate half of this now. There's 250 calories I can have, and then once I get another hour, I'll just eat the other half of the bag. And so it's mixing things in just like that, and that's just kind of the way I
Yeah.
go by the feel that way. If it works, if something's tasting good, it tastes good. If something isn't
Yeah.
good, I just won't eat it. And then I always try to at least brush my teeth once throughout the race somewhere, and just kind of gives it,
Yeah.
if nothing tastes good, it's the best way to have something taste good at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's smart. And for all the sugar purposes on the teeth, I've had some athletes on here and they have like a prescription toothpaste that they'll brush their teeth with before on like race day morning because of all the sugar that they have to consume for their
Yeah, I
nutrition.
haven't heard of the prescription toothpaste, but there's times where it's like I can just feel my teeth are just 40, 50 miles in, and it's like a nasty, gritty feeling. And
Yeah. Yeah, the dentists listening are not happy. I'm sure. I've had my dentist ask me a handful of times like about it. But the nerds clusters, I've heard a lot of people like those. I think certainly for like a cost per gram of carb ratio too, compared to a lot of these sports nutrition products. But are they kind of sour, like tart, or does it help
there's
like
some of them
mix
are
it?
tart and some of them are a little sweeter.
Mm-hmm.
I just bought whatever random bags I found at my grocery store, and
Yeah.
I just mix them together, and then so it's
Yeah.
kind of that sweet and you never kind
Nice.
of know what you're getting.
Yeah.
The other one I like is like a sweet tart cherry rope. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're like 8 inches long, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what, it's just like a gummy. I'll eat a bunch of
Yeah.
those too. Those are kind of my other go-to of what I like eating a lot during the
Yeah. I mean, it's all about finding things too that hold good in certain temperatures and yeah, appeal to your taste buds so you can keep bringing calories in at that point in the race. So, yeah, I think that's great. So, with that, did you just, I mean, it sounds like you have, like you said, an iron gut, but no GI issues or no muscle cramping or any of that stuff through the race?
Yeah, and so the only time I've ever experienced any sort of stomach cramping ever is from like half marathon to 30K.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think because it's pushing, my body's
Yeah.
pushing way harder.
Yeah.
Longer distance stuff, I've never had any real, I guess I had one time at Tushers it was hot and I couldn't really eat or drink anything,
Mm.
but I didn't have like issues to where stomach cramps and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah. And then even muscle wise, there was maybe once or twice I kind of started getting some cramps on the top of, we would have been like 70 miles in. And I had some knee problems that day. And I don't know if it was my stride or if I just got behind on
Mm.
electrolytes at that point, but I really didn't take nearly as many of the goo pills that I thought I was going to take also. And so
Mm.
it
Hmm.
ended up just I think the more water that day was a big factor.
Yeah, yeah. With the heat training thing, it makes me think with you said the fighting background, did you do a lot of like heat suit, like weight cutting stuff, like back in the day when you were doing more fighting?
Yeah, I did. So the most weight I ever cut was like 40 pounds in 6 weeks. And so
Wow.
it was, I had some tough cuts of that way, but it was never,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was, you go in the sauna with kind of those,
Yeah.
I have like a top that's kind of like a dive suit material, I guess, to where it's super thick and super tight. And then
Hmm.
once you get into the sauna, it makes you sweat like crazy. And
Yeah.
so
Wow.
that could all play into the adapt.
Yeah, your tolerance build over time too is sounds impressive. Also, probably your ability to tolerate pain. I feel like you from fighting, I feel like you've got to have maybe a high pain tolerance.
Yeah, I never really got hurt or anything during fight.
Okay.
So it's, I think just life is
Yeah.
I've done in my life and beat up my body and done
Yeah.
like that. And then I think it's more mine's not the physical pain. So I've always been able to just kind of work through it. It's that mental,
Hmm.
um, I kind of figure it's some of the things I've been in my life have been way harder than most of any race I've done. And so it's kind of referring back to that a lot of times to
Yep.
think you can get through this. You've been through
Yeah.
worse, and it's something you didn't want to do instead of something you're enjoying to do.
Right. Yeah. 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 I think that's great. And I think that's a good perspective to have too when you're out there and it helps, yeah, keep the motivation going. Okay, jumping back a little bit before Zion, do you do anything with your nutrition in the week or so or days leading up to the race? Do you change or increase carbs or yeah, what does
Um,
that look like?
I normally I'll try to kind of water load a little bit
Mm.
before, and
Hmm.
I didn't do a good enough job. I just had so much going on before the race and this year and trying to get things arranged and just got behind on what I wanted to do. The only thing I really changed in my diet the week of is just try to cut out a lot more fiber
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But then I ate some crappy pizza the night before the race. If I wanted to go to a good pizza place and they're like, oh, it's going to be 2.5 hour wait. And so we weren't
Oh,
able
shoot.
to go there. So we ended up settling for Domino's. And so I
Yeah.
ate half a Domino's pizza before the night
Wow.
before and then just kind of just winged it that way. But yeah, I'll normally try to do lighter-ish
Hmm.
food throughout the week, but still um, kind of higher carbs. And then throughout like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, depending on the day of the race, of course, I'll start mixing in more carbs throughout the day,
Hmm.
smaller increments instead of trying to do like one big um, carb loading.
Yeah.
It seems to be a little bit better. And then also, I don't feel so bloated and kind of
Hmm.
get that weird feeling if I go and slam like a couple big bowls of pasta or something within the
Yeah.
day. And then it just seems like and then it seems like I retain more water also if I have over carb loaded.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. When you say like bring in small amounts of carbs, what are those sources that work well for you? Like what types of carbs are you choosing?
I ate a lot of bread, a lot
Yeah.
of cookies. Just basically it's kind of just anything with the higher carb levels, and then
Yeah.
it's just kind of what I'm feeling the day. Breadsticks, or
Hmm.
if it's pizza that day, or I mean I can eat pizza every day, and I think I would be fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I think it's good to hear all these different options too, because oftentimes I've had listeners and I've also had clients where they've struggled with the carb, like increasing their carbs or choosing. I had one client actually, she wanted to like only carb load on like this like one type of bread. I forget the type of bread it was, but and she like by lunch, she was like, I'm sick of this bread. I can't. So I think like having those, like you're saying, smaller, like different options. Some of our athletes do well with like liquid carb options too. And so yeah, I think it's helpful to hear what's working for people and have different options to reference than just
yeah, and
bread all
there's so many food options that actually have carbs in them. You shouldn't just restrict it to one, in my opinion. At least I want to
Yeah.
eat things I enjoy, and if I'm going to get bored of something, I'll just choose something else. And
Yeah.
and enjoy it at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's smart. Okay, so you did some carb loading. Do you do anything supplementally, like beta alanine or extra salt or any of those things in the days before the race?
I don't do any
None
of
of
that
it.
stuff. Yeah,
None of it. Just a
no,
genetic marvel. Just
no. So I
crushing.
wish I would. I'm starting to feel like an old man this week, and
Yeah.
but yeah, I've tried to take supplements. Problem is, I'll buy them and then I'll be good for a week, and then I'll
Yeah.
forget one day, and then they just sit in a drawer, and
Yeah.
so it just makes it tough. If I could get onto a steady routine, I would be fine. It's just
Hmm.
getting and staying on the routine is where I find the biggest issue. And
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do any caffeine on race day?
I try not to drink caffeine. I don't drink any. I drink so much caffeine during my normal days that I try not to. Kind of the day before, and then the morning throughout most of the day. I don't do gels or anything with caffeine in it. And
Hmm.
then depending on the distance I'm going and the time of day, um, I'll end up drinking caffeine at some point, which I'll just like Zion, I did an energy drink, which is like
Hmm.
I think it's got 240 or 260 milligrams of caffeine in it. And that was
Hmm.
probably about 8 o'clock at night, 8:30. And so
Yeah.
I just pounded the whole thing. And then in my mind, I thought it got me through the rest of the day, but I don't know how much benefit it really has or doesn't have,
Yeah.
but it seems to work. And that's what I've always, most races by a certain time, Hurt was the same way. When the sun started going down, I wanted the caffeine, and it's just problem is I get headaches if I don't drink a
Mm-hmm.
decent amount now, and so that's by the time I start getting tired, and then I don't know if it's the fatigue and a little bit of dehydration, or if it's just in my mind that I telling myself I'm getting a headache and need to have
Yeah.
some caffeine, but
Yeah.
seems to be all right for now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, I mean, with having the like again, the iron gut is a very lucky thing to have as well. So having that and thinking and talking about all these different types of nutrition that were consumed on race day, or in if anything too from on course, do you try and make sure you're practicing with the majority of those things in your training?
Yeah, so majority of the stuff that's always my plan that I
Hmm.
have and stuff I've purchased and taken to races, it's all stuff I've used throughout training and at least tested. And then
Hmm.
kind of as soon as my plan goes off the rails, I'll just start just eating whatever. uh,
Sounds good.
yeah, whatever sounds good, whether it be
Yeah.
something from the aid station. I actually don't think, other than pancakes, I don't think I ate anything from pancakes and some watermelon were the only things I actually ate from an aid
Mm.
station
Hmm.
through all of Zion.
Yeah. Wow. And through kind of your journey with nutrition and fueling during sport, have there been any kind of like light bulb moments where you're like, oh no, that did not go over well, or this I feel really good on?
Um, I think peanut butter and jelly is kind of always the one I feel the best if it
Mm-hmm.
goes down good. I've had some bad watermelon,
Oh
and that was
shoot.
a horrible experience to where I don't know if it's just out of season or I picked it up
Oh.
and looked at it and was like, this doesn't look right. Let me eat it anyways.
Oh
And then an hour later, it didn't give me like bad stomach issues. It made me a little bit bloated,
no.
and
Yeah.
I only had one or two bites because it was sour, and when I ate
Oh.
it, and I was like, this isn't good. So I
Yeah.
didn't finish the whole piece, but
That's good.
um, yeah, that's about only really. And then of course, well, I guess the other one was at Hurt where I was pretty late into the race. I was on my last 5 or 6 miles. I felt like I was going to fall asleep, so I pounded
Mm.
a couple like mandarin orange cups.
Mm-hmm.
Still felt like I was pretty tired and kind of like almost to the point of sleepwalking. And then
Mm.
I had a baggie of it was either I think it was Sour Patch strawberries.
Oh yeah.
Had an entire pack. I ended up eating the entire bag right then. And then by the time I got past the last big climb that we had, it was like everything kicked in, and I was actually able to run the rest of the way. Went
Wow.
from death marching to basically a 10-ish minute mile for the last four or
Nice.
five miles. So
Yeah. Glucose getting in the body and the
yeah.
brain. It's an amazing thing. So after something like Zion 100, what time of day is it when you finish?
So I finished. at just before 5 a.m. So it would have been like
Wow.
4:40 a.m.
Okay.
And
What is happening in that like first 1 to 2 hours post crossing the finish line, nutritionally or hydration wise? Anything coming
um,
in?
so this time I drank like a liquid IV or some, I can't
Mm.
remember what I drank. And then I got a cup of noodles at the finish
Hmm.
line. And then I was just going to I had a little camper we pulled
Hmm.
out for the race to somewhere to sleep. And so I ended up just going to the camper, hurrying, kind of showered. I didn't really eat any of the noodles. I probably drank maybe half my bottle of
Yeah.
water and hydration. And I laid down, and then it was like I slept for like 3 hours maybe.
Nice.
And then
Yeah.
and then I got up and I had a ticket. They had a food truck there. And so I had a
Hmm.
free meal and made the decision to eat the worst plate of pulled pork,
Oh no.
nacho fries or something. And
Yeah.
it was this weird gelatinous where it must have got cold and they didn't reheat it all the way.
Oh no.
And so I ate that, and it wasn't good or bad. It
Yeah.
was, I ate it and was, but, and then I really didn't eat much the rest of the day that day.
Mm.
I ended up getting home. I had a guy coached, it was his first 100. And so we waited for him to finish. And then by the time I got home, I ate something. I can't remember what I ate. It was just something small. And then I ended up going to bed and then not really getting up, and I slept all night. And then I just really wasn't that hungry
Yeah.
for after this race for some reason. A lot of times I'll get a nap in, and then it's like no matter if it's protein or carbs, it's my body's normally just craving one of
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of whichever one it is for the rest of that day. And
Interesting.
I just never, I never wanted anything. It was kind of
Yeah.
a weird feeling of
Hmm.
just not needing and I've heard it's always your body is telling you what you need or what you're missing, and that's what it's chasing. But
Hmm.
I can't imagine I was even across the board on both of them, where my body had what it needed. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like that's kind of uncommon for you to not have much of an appetite post race after you take a nap.
yeah, and it's normally I if there's a bag of chips here and I want carbs, I'll eat an entire bag of chips. If there's um whether it be if I'm going to eat something that has protein, I'll eat
Hmm.
chicken, I'll eat cheese, I'll eat just whatever it is. And then
Get
this time
calories
it
in.
just wasn't
Yeah.
what what I was expecting. And even the days after, it was still just kind
Hmm.
of went back to a normal eating schedule, which was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. That is interesting. And this wasn't the longest distance you've done because you did cook it down at 250.
Yes.
And did you have any issues after that? Did you have,
No, I pretty much ate. Well, I ate a ton after that race, and I don't know if that one just because you eat so much more during the race, but
mm-hmm.
I was still same thing. I got back, I ate a bunch of food as soon as the race was over. I slept for a few hours, went and ate a bunch more food, and then spent like the next 2 days just feeling like I was a garbage pit of just I couldn't get enough food. It didn't matter
Yeah.
what I was never full, and I would eat and eat and eat, and didn't shockingly didn't really put on any weight, but
Yeah.
it's just like my body was wanting
Just
anything in it.
burning through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just turning the tissue over. Wow. Yeah, the GI thing is very interesting post race because we do have like loads of athletes that after a race, like they're just so over all the like sweets and their stomachs not feeling super great and they don't have an appetite. But I also wonder like how much of that is core temperature elevation and or dehydration and blood flow going away from the gut too, contributing to that. So yeah, very interesting. Um, okay, so oh, I have one last question. So we talked a little bit about your hydration. Was there a specific strategy that you had in mind in terms of like ounces per hour you were trying to target for Zion?
Um, I was I was trying to drink at least 500 milliliters throughout the hour for the first few hours until it
Mm-hmm.
started getting hot. And
Yeah.
I was going to try to drink. I ran majority of the time in just a waist belt that I have. Then I had two 800 milliliter soft flasks.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was between aid stations to at least drink 1 to 1.5 of those.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I got down into the hot part of the day, I ended up putting on just a small vest that
Hmm.
had a couple more 300 milliliter soft flasks in it, but I never ended up really even blowing through more than about an 800 between aid
Wow.
stations. That
Yeah.
one section where they didn't have ice or water,
Yeah.
I pretty much I had to be a little more strategic with it, but it was even in that area, I could have probably made it another mile or two with the water I even
Hmm.
had. Um,
Wow.
but and then it was just as soon as I got to the aid station, I just made sure I kind of drank a little bit more at that one.
Yeah. So that deserty section where you were low on water, and we talked a little bit about the mental side of things of like earlier about focusing on things that have been harder in your life and doing what this thing you've signed up for and you chose to do. Is that something that you were thinking about at that time, like that hot day section of the race, low on water? Was that at all going through your mind?
Yeah, I knew that even if I would have ran out of water, I could have made it regardless. And there was enough people still
Yeah.
that I had either passed it before that, but just not knowing their water thing. But to me, I never really let that get me down. As many people as were waiting for them to get water and ice back up there, I was just like, there's far more people who need it way worse than I do right now. So I'm
Mm.
just going to keep doing my thing at this point. And then
Hmm.
there was some points where I was like, okay, I can see the aid station. I know I can drink through this. And I was glad I didn't, because as soon as you can see the aid station, it looks like it's like a half mile, three-quarters of a mile away. And
Hmm.
the road turns and you end up going like another mile and a half out and then you loop back into the
Mm.
aid station. So, but yeah, it was never a big stress. I think I would have made it regardless. And
Yeah.
if it would have got bad, I would have just walked it in instead of ran.
Yeah. Do you do you gauge it too off of like how many pee breaks you have to take?
Um, I have, and then I kind of base it on when I do have to pee, of just kind of watch the color,
Yeah.
then realize I don't want it to be too clear and I don't want it to be too
Hmm.
yellow. And so I just kind of try to pay attention. And then I think throughout the day, I wasn't really going a ton. And then once it kind of started cooling down, it
Yeah.
kind of came back around. So I probably was behind a little bit throughout the day, even though
Hmm.
I didn't feel like I was, but
Yeah.
I never got to the point of where it was super scared. I was still peeing at least once an hour, so
Yeah.
wasn't too bad.
That's great. I think that's also very helpful information for listeners to hear, like still peeing once an hour. And how long were you on course?
Just under 24.
Yeah. So I think that's such helpful information. I've talked to too many people where they're like, yeah, I peed twice. It's like, no, no, no. That's probably not. We're not doing enough with our hydration there. If we're only peeing once every 12 hours, that's problematic. So yeah, I think that's yeah, great information for people to take on and hear. Okay, so I know we're getting close on our time here, so I'll make sure I wrap things up. So looking at back at your performance, would you change anything about your fueling or hydration strategy now looking back?
Um, yes and no, I guess. I don't know if there's enough little tweaks I
Mm.
could make to make any more of a difference. Um, Other than having a little more water in that one section, but
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I don't think maybe trying to eat something other than Nerds clusters. If I was going to eat something solid, try to find
Mm.
something a little better than those. But I
Hmm.
also never got to a point of feeling like I was depleted or didn't have the energy either. So I think going with what works,
Hmm.
I feeling for me has just always been the best way. And
Yeah. And so did I hear you correctly? Do you not did you it was tailwind in the bottles in the first couple hours and then no liquid tailwind kind of later in the race? Is that?
I would have a little bit later on.
Mm.
I always had one of those high carb mixes in one of those 800s regardless.
Okay. Yeah.
Just wasn't drinking it. I was, like I said, it was like every hour and a half, somewhere that I
Hmm.
was going to try to drink an 800 of it. And then it just got to the point of where by my palate, I was mixing, you're supposed to mix it for like 500 mil soft flask. I was mixing
Mm-hmm.
it 800 and it just still was too much.
Yeah.
taste for me. And so I would end up drinking it at about halfway down and then filling that up with water. So it was always
Oh, yeah.
diluting it. So I was always getting something, but it just wasn't the full amount.
Yeah.
And then by the time I'd get to an aid station, so I probably had four or five of those bags the entire race
Wow.
of that, which is, I guess that's what, 1,500-ish calories.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Wow. Awesome. Okay. Let's see, what advice would you give to your younger self about nutrition?
um don't think it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in my life trying to be on a diet and then
Oh
realized
gosh. Yeah.
it's not a perfect diet. It isn't always going to make for the best performance. And if it sucks, it's not really worth doing it. So,
Yeah. 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 Okay, I'll do some quick fire questions, some this or that's, and then we'll circle back to your two truths and a lie. And we maybe kind of covered a little bit of this, but I'll fire away here. So gels or chews?
probably choose if I had to choose one.
Yeah. Electrolyte tabs or salt caps?
I don't really know the difference. I've just
I
always
think a
used,
tab dissolves in the water versus the
okay,
capsule is
so yeah,
just
I've
more.
never mixed anything other than like Tailwind. I've tried like the salt stick chewable ones.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
They're okay. They're not my jam. I
Yeah.
always use the Goo Roctane ones have worked.
Oh, yeah.
The only ones
The
I've ever,
capsule.
yeah, that's the only one
Yeah.
I've ever taken.
Nice. Okay. Real food or like engineered fuel?
Um, I would probably go real food over the engineered stuff if I had a preference.
Yeah. And then are you queuing on drinking to thirst or are you drinking on a schedule?
I try to do it by schedule, but it's more by thirst.
Yeah. And then sweet or savory during an ultra?
It's kind of the same thing. It just depends on my mood. If I go sweet during the day, it seems to be noodles
Hmm.
and pancakes at night to where
Hmm.
I don't need any syrup on them. So it's more of just the bread. But I think, yeah, it's 50-50 on that one.
Yeah. And then handheld water bottles or a hydration pack?
I always use some sort of a pack.
Yeah.
Um, Anything under like a 30K, I'll use a waist belt or a pack, and then
Hmm.
if it's something short, I'll use a handheld.
Awesome. All right. Okay. And then before we jump back to your two truths and lie, what's coming up on the racing calendar for you?
Um, I have a couple options for this year. The only one I'm signed up for is the Cowboy 200 in
Mm,
Nebraska at the end of September. I'm trying to make the decision now if I have the mental capacity to train for another 200 this year. I I did 300s within about 5 months from
wow.
end of September last year through Zion this year, and um, mind is getting a little burned out. So
Yeah.
also got the option of doing the Hurricane 100K in West Virginia the first week of
Hmm.
September, and then the last option if I want to do it is the Bear
Mm,
again, but it's the same weekend as the 200 miler. So
okay.
it's kind of figuring out over the next couple weeks and make a decision, and then kind of touch base with my new coach and see what
Yeah.
he thinks is best, and
Wow.
just keep playing from that.
Nice.
And then if I don't race the rest of the year, I'm also fine with that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Take a little brain break. Okay. So for your two truths and a lie, you said you grew up on in a small farming community and you did 4-H Western showman stuff. You said, played semi-pro football for 4 years and then you got a walk-on scholarship for the University of Utah. I thought the 4 years part of the semi-pro football was a lie. Is that correct?
no,
No. Which one was the lie?
the scholarship.
Oh, did you go to University of Utah?
No, I actually never went to college at all, and I was playing semi-pro football before I actually graduated. So
Wow. That's cool.
it was definitely an experience of playing with grown men when you're still pretty young. It was pretty.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. And then what were your 4-H like sh Western showmanship things that you
We
did?
we did 4-H. I grew up in, of course, like I said, a small farming community, and so we did the 4-H and then FAA during high school, and then when I was really young, it was a different organization that was all like Western showmanship for horses. So we'd go out and
Hmm.
do different patterns, and you'd have to show them kind of what you knew on horseback and things like that.
Cool.
So it was, you look
That's
at
neat.
pictures of me now, and you would never realize I grew up basically a farm
Yeah.
boy kid, and so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh, that makes me think, did you watch the show Yellowstone?
I watch some of it. I don't watch really hardly any TV or movies.
Yeah. Because
Others.
you're out there training and running. It just makes the showman it makes me think because I think they did some like horse arena like stuff in that. That's
Yeah, they
the
were doing like barrel stuff,
yeah.
like the show horses and stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different level. And they have those horses that are legitimately like $150,000 for some of those horses, which
Yeah.
wild.
It is wild. It is wild. Yeah. Yeah. That's very neat. Well, this has been super fun. Where can people find you, follow along on your journey, all that stuff?
I basically just either use Facebook, which I'm not on a whole lot, under Ricky Urias, and then
Mhm.
on Instagram I'm just under Rage Rhino, just all one word.
All right. Well, we will link those in the show notes for the listeners. And then if you race this year, we'll be cheering you on from afar. So have a
Thank
blast
you.
if you're out there. Awesome. Thanks
Sounds
for
good.
joining us today, Ricky.
Yeah, no problem.